Shall we call the meeting to order? Excellent.
We have a quorum.
So the first thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the February 24th, 2025 meeting. Any comments on them? Does someone want to pass or a motion to approve the minutes?
A motion that we approve the minutes as written.
I'll second. That's a first from Commissioner Kuzmiak, a second from Commissioner Carter. Okay.
Sorry.
Now we
Do we have
have.
to vote on that one?
Yeah, we do need.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
All those in
If it was like a
favor.
consent one or not.
Well,
So
it's technically unanimous consent that doesn't require a motion
Oh.
second, but it's more just if no one offers amendments, everyone's assumed to have approved it.
Okay,
Because why would someone not offer amendments and then disapprove?
so we have unanimous consent then?
I would, and you can ask, what,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then we'll move on to public comment. Is there any general public comment?
I mean, I see people on the line, but those might not be members of staff. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
A member.
no public comment. We'll move to agenda item number 1. The update about the route changes on the transit, Lawrence Transit.
All right, I'll go ahead and just introduce Felice is here with us tonight as part of our Connected City Advisory Group, and she wanted to speak to you guys on some changes to transit routes. So sorry, Felice, I just wanted to introduce you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Works. Yes, so I'm Felice, Interim Director of Transit. We do annual route changes per year, annual. So I'm not gonna walk you through each proposed change since we do have a public process open. I was just going to show you our website, show you the resources that we have here for folks. I'll show you the survey and just how you can access the information. And so any feedback that you have, we'd love it just through our general public process. And so what we like to do with our survey responses, we write a report after all comments are in, and we call it closing the loop. And so you'll see a report of the proposed and the final changes based on feedback. We usually do pie charts of positive, negative, neutral, and you'll see every comment accounted for, responded to in the appendix. So it's a pretty open, transparent process. We've got our engagement shown here. So this is where we're talking to our riders at the 7th and Vermont Transit platform. We administer surveys to people to make sure that there's a paper process for those who don't have online access. Surveys are also available with our front desk here at Central Station at all times. You can see a list of all of the changes here. And so a lot of these are holdover changes we got really good feedback on last year in January and February that we needed more time to implement. If you remember our major route redesign, I think we'll be kind of refining the routes for the next, 10 years before we do route changes again. So we heard a lot of great feedback, and some of these are responses to that. So we're asking the public, these are our proposals. What do you think? Did we get it right? Did we hear you? Oops. Got the university changes on there as well. We try to present as one system and do everything together as much as we can. And then we've got our next steps and things here. Apologies for the scroll. So the survey is on Lawrence Listens. I'll take you there just briefly. Linked you right to it. And we'll ask you one mandatory question, and then we have each route and the new proposals here. So try to make it user-friendly. And if you wanted to research the routes outside of the survey, we have them all here together. So you can see everything there and kind of compare them, look at the written changes. We've got alt text for screen readers on the survey, so we should be good to go.
When does the survey close?
Good question, March 31st, so it's been open from the beginning to the end of March.
So out of curiosity, how long have you been doing annual route updates for?
It's a good question, at least since 2020.
Okay, which was the original route
Mhm.
redesign thing?
That was, I think, just when the previous director started and
Okay,
so that's what I can speak
They
to.
did them prior to
Yeah.
that. They just looked very different.
okay.
Yeah,
In
They
terms of
wouldn't
what?
do surveying on the buses. They weren't doing really proactive outreach. They would just have route changes and have a public process and leave it open, but it wasn't as ambitiously trying to go out and seek feedback in the way that you can speak to the last 5 years.
yeah,
Because it's a federal requirement that you do this type of change before you, or that you engage with your ridership and the public before you do this type of service changes.
Has it always been a requirement or have they just kind of enforced it a little bit more explicitly?
I believe it's always been a requirement. It's the interpretation of the staff that has changed in terms of how they're doing that work.
That makes sense. Mhm. Okay.
Which routes operate on the B schedule? I see that Route 1112 is gonna operate now on that. Which other ones already?
That's mostly the KU, when KU's in session, it's a higher frequency on their routes and then they retain fewer of their routes on what they would call their B schedule.
Okay.
So the 11 and 12 are our coordinated routes. And so based on ridership and data, we're not seeing a huge increase sustained all year round. So we're dropping it back down to university kind of level service in the summer.
Did the highway times or frequency on Route 7 change?
No,
No.
no, that one's just a small change at 31st in Iowa.
Okay, that's just, okay, the bi-directional. Okay.
Yeah.
Which route is the most frequent now? Do you know?
A lot of them have peak and off-peak
Mhm.
frequency, and a lot of it has to do with, how long the route is. Route 6 has almost all 30-minute service just because of how long the route is, but there's like 2 trips where there's hourly in the daytime. The new Route 10 has 30-minute service, or new Route 4 has 30-minute service almost all day. So, but there's still the peak and off-peak, which was built into a Ford Sunday service. And also to make Route 8 a full-time route.
Okay,
That's where a
because
lot of those hours went.
the other ones are 15-minute headways, is that right?
Most are
30
30-minute
is the
peak and
lowest.
off-peak and an hour. So KU has high frequency routes on their circulators and some of their on-campus stuffs.
Oh, I thought that Route 7 used to have 15-minute headways, but now,
I don't think we
I
ever
don't
achieved that.
remember that ever
really?
in my time on P-TAC now.
Okay,
Yeah, so that was at best 30-minute is I think the highest frequency Lawrence has offered in
okay.
the history. But KU has those high frequency routes.
Be great if we could get.
That would be very good.
Yeah, funding.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, our headways are really tough
Mhm.
for riders. Is there ever been a conversation about increasing those in the future?
We had the conversation when we proposed Sunday service and it
Mhm.
was 50-50 split or it's,
Mhm.
and even every time we ask, Sunday service or filling in some of that midday, it remains 50-50 split. 'Cause
So we
it's-
keep the Sunday then?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just a tough budget conversation and the budget conversations aren't getting
Yeah.
easier.
Yep,
I
yep.
think you'll hear more from us about that later, on
Yeah.
a sales tax funded service.
That's 2027.
TBD.
Yeah, I thought it was 19 was when we had the vote on that. I can't remember.
Yeah, up for discussion now internally, but you will hear from us on it, yeah.
Sunday service seems pretty important, so I get that.
Mhm.
Should we get public comment, you think?
Um,
There members of the public? I usually just like to.
There aren't.
report for the reason that we tried.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Unless somebody's really lurking somehow.
See anyone? Public comment, any other questions, comments from commissioners?
Ryan in particular, I guess, since you're the only one remote.
No, I appreciate it. I don't think I've ever actually seen this PDF, so I'm just enjoying the visualizations on it. So I didn't serve on PTAC, I was on MMTC. So all this bus stuff is new to me, and I'm just happy to sit here and learn.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 2, the community engagement strategies for projects.
All right, well, with us tonight, we have two folks that are gonna wanna talk about community engagement strategies and sort of how we do our work, but we had this conversation at our last meeting, so I thought it might be helpful to bring you guys some information. So tonight with us, we have Michael Leos, who is our communications specialist for the Municipal Services and Operations side of the house. But also with us, we have Jessica Mortinger, who is one of our transportation MPO leaders and deep into the community engagement side of the work. So we bring both of those underneath our connected city strategy, along with the work that Felice was just sharing with you to do engagement around route redesign. So I'm thrilled to have Michael here tonight to talk about some recent strategies we've employed in the last couple of years. And he has some great graphic visuals I believe he's going to share. And then there's the rest of us in here that are using these methodologies that we'll be able to kind of follow along in that conversation and answer any questions you guys have about how we're connecting or engaging. So Michael, and then Jessica, I'm assuming we'll chase Michael.
Let me get my ducks in a row here, share my screen. Sure, perfect. My name is Michael Leos, and I serve as the Communication and Community Engagement Specialist for the MSO department. It's quite a mouthful. Very excited to be here today. A little nervous because I don't usually have to, I get to do a lot of internal comms. I'm doing external comms today. But I want to share two things with you. The first item today is sharing a little bit about our MSO community engagement. We're going to talk a little bit about the tools and process that we do. Come on. You got this. Computer, it's a little slow today. So I want to talk a little bit about the MSO community engagement process. We start by obviously determining the level of community engagement. We'll create those strategies, implement the strategies, and then of course, we're tracking that engagement, that feedback, and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and start with the first one. Oh, and is there a way to minimize the people on the right side there? Now the dog there, this is interesting. Yeah, that was my first time seeing the dog there. So we call this the checklist, for lack of a better term, but this is how one of our tools to help determine the level of engagement. And when we're building the CIP, we use this process and these tools to assess the level of engagement, to plan and budget accordingly. And we follow IAP2, the International Association of Public Participations criteria here. I have that memorized. And so you can see that the level of engagement sort of increases as it goes down. It gets to that darker color there at the bottom. And then you can sort of see some of the indicators that we use. I made it full size on my screen, but I kind of wish we could zoom in a little bit.
You can see it.
It's a little hard for me to see this right here. But anyway, so of course we go from inform to inform and consult. You're laughing at me going.
I know, you need to get an eye exam.
You got it right here.
And so obviously increases as we go down. And then there is a note at the bottom, different phases of a particular project may encompass different levels of community engagement. And I always like to note that at the beginning, because there are a lot of projects that we do in Lawrence that are not one size fits all. Certain levels, certain phases need to be emphasized more. So obviously we have our checklist. Another tool that we have, we lovingly call the iceberg, which, the terminology and metaphors could lead you a whole bunch of places, but we once again have our levels of engagement increasing as we go down. And then this guide provides some project examples. And of course, on an exhaustive list of project examples, but ones to sort of allow people to understand what projects would fall into what categories. And then of course, when we were developing this, we actually made a side note to talk about emergency and repair work, because we found that those didn't necessarily always fit cleanly into each level. And so we did make a note of that as well. And also I'll let you take a look at this, not much more than I can share. We do provide a little context under each level of engagement there. But this helps us to, stay organized, keep our ducks in a row, and make sure that we're all centered on the same things. Before I move on to our third little graphic, does anybody have any questions, comments on these? Just want to make sure I'm not going too fast.
Yeah, if I could have just like a little bit longer to read through.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jessica, anything you'd add or share this moment?
I had a quick comment, and you guys are probably already a couple steps ahead of me on this one, but I feel like many times in especially more intense public engagement procedures, like say the downtown master plan, I always hear complaints with people saying like, oh, I had no idea this was happening. I never found out about this. How'd you contact me? And usually there are ways that people were contacted, but maybe in some cases, people are desiring more public engagement. Since this is an actual standard that you guys basically adapted, right?
Mhm.
I guess is the hope that you can now show this when somebody's like, hey, this seems like an inappropriate amount of public engagement. Like, look, like this is a thing that would fall under involved, and this is what we've done to meet this standard.
Mhm.
But also, do you have any suggestions for how we could have met those, those communication goals better? It seems like it's a really nice, like explicit and quantitative somewhat framework to actually come to an agreement on, instead of just like, we think we did a good job. Or like, you should have opened your email.
Yeah, so if you like follow any of IAP2, that International Association of Public Participation, they have training courses and you'll get 2 books that are like this inches thick, right? And I think as an organization, as you're trying to operationalize that, we had to be really thoughtful about how do we create tools that can translate what those expectations are in a way that we can be transparent both with the public when we're doing this, to know what you would expect on different types of projects, but also to hold each other accountable, right? So these tools, a good example of this, if you look at this tool or the previous tool, when engineers as a project manager of a capital project are they're developing their level of engagement, they're doing that with these tools in mind to our specific local expectations for what this means in terms of strategies. So on the next slide, I don't want to preface this a little too much. You'll see the strategies, and Michael can talk about kind of how they're building out a plan based on what level of engagement they kind of have that has been agreed to in the budget process, in the CIP process. They set that level of, in the development of the capital improvement program, they're setting that level of engagement with the understanding that that's at the time when you have to budget for the amount of engagement that you need to do. Again, this has been developed for capital projects. And this has been a tool that MSO developed and brought Parks and Rec in on when working to operationalize that internally. So again, the example you have mentioned is a different department. And they are also trained in IAP2, but have different interpretation and weren't involved in this process of setting these same kind of internal tools to use to interpret those things. So I hate to speak a little too much of a process that's outside of what I think these tools were developed to do, but I think the intention is that everyone is supposed to be in following the city's commitment to, under the strategic plan, to community engagement. And as such, many staff across the organization are trained in IAP2. And it's kind of up it to those different department leaderships to determine how to implement that.
I guess I didn't realize that each department would maybe have a different way of implementing this. Was it ever discussed or is it even recommended to have a streamlined, unified version of it that the entire city uses, or like the departments are just too different? Like you have to think of it differently.
There is a streamlined, very high level, but this was the breakdown for projects, because most of the projects, CIP projects, design and construction projects, are managed by the construction management engineering group within MSO. So you'll see, parks projects are mentioned on here, for example. But there was an effort about 5 or 6 years ago for individuals and departments across the city to go through that IAP2. And then our city communications group also developed kind of this high level guidelines, few pages. It doesn't go into all of the strategies because they're very specific to what are you engaging on, a policy, a project, some other initiative, a service. So, it's more broad.
And I will say that this is the most comprehensive I've seen a community do ever in my work anyway around CIP engagement. And the fact that we've laid something like this out this intentionally is, I would say, pretty unique within communities of any size that I've been with. So this is a pretty strong layout of how we are going to do the work and our commitment to engagement. As far as anything and everything that could come up with the city, that's city comms, and they are working, and Michael can probably elaborate more because he has better engagement with them on a day-to-day basis than we do about how intentional they are doing that work. So But this is for projects, which is the part that we do the most of.
One other point that you made, Nick, that I want to foreshadow a little bit, for our third point is sort of the complaint of, oh, I didn't hear that we were doing this engagement. I didn't know that this was going on. So hold on to that thought, because not to hype it up too much, but I do have a little bit of that later.
I mean, I never would have noticed that MSO is way more active on Facebook than they used to be, so I have a feeling it's partly your deal. Way more active.
We try. I do make a lot of social posts, I won't lie. So our first, just to go back one slide really quickly, so these first two help us determine the level of engagement. We have our checklist, we have our lovely iceberg. So this third one goes on to more of the strategies or our techniques.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, I was guessing that most of the complaints are gonna be for people who just don't like the modes of communication that the city has chosen to alert them that something is gonna happen, that, you know, like a minor street reconstruction or taping the lines on it. Probably not something that needs to be mentioned in more than the Journal World or something, but completely redoing Mass Street, tying up tons of businesses and people who live there would probably be something that stretches down more and needs something that's more than just, hey, we're going to be doing this over the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Way more than just an inform, just telling them it's happening.
It's really hard to know though, because it's kind of inconsistent. I've been at public meetings and over the last decade where somebody's like, well, you did a citywide bikeway plan and you didn't send me a mailer. And it's like, okay, well, it's probably not realistic for us to send mailers for these citywide processes. But equally so, we were at the Mass Street project meeting where we did send mailers and the person's like, oh, I didn't get a mailer. I'm like, well, we have record of your address. We sent it to you. And she's like, oh, that, we showed her what it looked like. And she said, oh, that thing, I threw it away. It was too fancy. I thought it was an advertisement. So I think.
Make your mailers look worse.
Yeah, so I use those as examples because I think no matter what you do, sometimes
Someone's going to get.
someone is gonna be unhappy.
That's what I was gonna say is like, a lot of times I don't hear about somebody being unhappy until it's the final, like the decision has been made and it's been put out there and then.
And that's also hard because you may have had a whole process where you sent mailers to neighbors, you did all these things. I mean, that is common for us on projects where we have any project and after the commission has made a decision about a design element or whatever, then a business owner or a property owner comes out of the woodwork. It's like, where were you in this process?
I'm pretty sure that happened when we were talking during PTAC before that got shut down about where to put the downtown transfer location, that there was a lot of reach to people and still they came up on the last meeting when we were going to prove it and said, I didn't hear about this. I'm going to complain now. And that.
And I think the thing about that, we take those comments seriously in the sense like we went to go look, are you on the mailing list? Did we make a mistake? Is there something else we need to do better in process? And that's, I think, the burden of what we can take on as staff to try to just keep doing better.
Absolutely.
We go back one slide.
Absolutely.
So on the consult, this is where it kind of gets murky for me, right? So like inform, these are things that look like they're engineering health safety standards, right? We are going to replace the water line because if we don't, it's busted, and so we're not going to ask it's not like if the community said to us, no, you wouldn't do it. But then I see some things up there like water tower replacement or stormwater drainage projects where those seem like those would be like health safety projects too.
You'd be surprised with the water tower replacement. This may have happened before you got here, but it was a huge deal. And it was aesthetics.
This was developed around the time we had just gone through the Stratford Water Tower.
Okay, yeah.
That's why it's there.
We decided initially that would be an inform. It became an escalated, into consult as we went along. With more feedback desired of what the park will look like, what the tower will look like. Have you, considered all these other aspects? So that's where on the consult level, it's listening and then providing feedback more than just, okay, we're going to be on your street at this time. We're informing you of the project.
Okay.
It was those listening sessions and feedback, incorporating some of that at times,
Because I was thinking about like the street construction with impacts. Well, we're going to do that one way or another.
Right.
And I guess, when we ask the community for feedback about that, I don't want to put, I don't.
Maybe talk a little bit about how you negotiate, how the conversations go with commercial property owners or retail establishments in like when you have to do a big project that has longer term impacts to access or parking?
Right, so we're using consult with the Jayhawk Watershed Project. So that's an example of a stormwater drainage project, and it has street construction with an impact of more than 6 months. So, 9th Street next year, there's gonna be periods where there's just one lane in one direction. But there's impacts for extended duration to parking. There's some rerouting during that time when we only have one direction of traffic, for transit. And so there's a bigger impact to those businesses and the residents that are using those access points. So at that point, starting early and ensuring that we've had all those conversations and figured out, okay, when do your deliveries get made and when does, and digging in more to ensure that it's a lot of times the access. And then coordinating with KU and, when they have graduation, we don't want to shut down 9th in Mississippi on graduation weekend. We don't want to shut it down when there's a game in the stadium, and so that falls under that consult. Let's hear from them, get feedback, ideas that maybe something we weren't aware of, and then modify the schedule or the phasing of a project to incorporate that.
Got it.
So that's an interesting example because though it is a stormwater project at its core, it's also a street reconfiguration project. So it's full of three involved. I have a feeling that maybe some external circumstances that kind of forced it to be consult rather than involved because there was a timeline involved. And it was a stormwater project at its core. It just happened to also include.
But you'll recall, it did have, at that point, it did get elevated because it had 2 open houses and some additional strategies that were just
That's what I thought
specific to the roadway section stuff.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
Like,
some of these different phases of the project kind of can elevate into a more intense phase. You make that decision. Now you're going back into this other phase where it's still part of those strategies.
So it's not only that, well, it's flexible too, like as things ramp up or ramp down, it's like now it's an informed thing,
Yeah, as
Now
we
it's
were
collaborate.
looking at, for instance, bike facilities on 9th, that piece of it became involved, right? But other portions, I would say a majority of it is consult. And then when we get to construction, most of that is just the inform level. But we do have on that particular project, a contractor that wants to ensure the businesses are getting their access and wants to hear feedback. So they've offered up, like weekly times during this 30 minutes. If you want to come and talk to the contractor, you can. That's a completely different level, but that's something the contractor wants to do to avoid causing issues on their project. So.
This is really interesting then. So it sounds like, I guess, I hadn't thought of this as something that can be piecemeal for different parts of large projects. So like the Mass Street replacement, for example, there are parts that are truly just informed. Like you're really just doing street construction and sidewalk improvement. There's no need to tell people what they like ASCE grade of concrete or whatever that's using. But the part of it that is reconstruction or major reconfiguration, that part is involved. So it's like the scope can be divided among the iceberg, which is interesting.
Yeah, some of it has to do just with what in that decision, in the project that you're embarking on, how much level of flexibility, not the non-negotiables, but the things that are negotiable for your community, where do you have space for the community to share their input and impact for them to allow them to help shape the project? And that oftentimes guides some of those things like we're not gonna not do ADA. That's a good example, right? We're gonna need to do that. We're gonna need to make our connections. Those are gonna be things we do. But we still present that as part of the whole picture when we go out and talk to people about multimodal improvements, because maybe there's crosswalk placement, maybe there's signal timing, maybe there's, the bikeway elements that all also impact how
Setting the
people feel in a
context for what they can understand the decision space that we have is.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just messy too.
Yeah, I get the feeling the community would like collaborate on most everything that we do.
Yes.
That's not physically
But
feasible. You guys would be working.
and the cost associated with that, the amount of resources that.
Well, and there's a lot of federal regulations too that zoning requirements.
But some of those things, if the system-wide plan had that level of engagement, then you went through some of that process that when you get to the next phase of implementing something in the plan, you can stand back and fall back on your storytelling. That's the cycle of here's what we heard, here's why it's in the plan, which is if anybody's ever heard from me before, it's like, well, this was in a plan and the planning process had a public engagement process.
So yeah, the project that we're designing and constructing constructing might be informed, but that's because it went through collaborate in order to come up with the plan to do that initially.
Okay.
So we're just following through with the plan. So we've already had the discussion and collaboration with the public. But sometimes we then hear about it, that final decision point where, yeah, we have to relook.
Talk a little more about the strategy.
No, it's just about the go back to action. So pulling up these strategies again, you can see, I really like the inform level because, I wouldn't say most of, but a lot of MSO projects are just your inform level, letting people know of who, what, when, where, and why. And so I love the breakdown that we do between here's how we can approach people physically, here's how we can do things electronically, and then other avenues that we have to reach them as well. And once again, Nick, that thought about reaching people, we're gonna get there, I promise. Not sure much more of what to add here. One note that I'm sure you can see is that I like to emphasize with project managers when we're going into these projects is even if it's at the consultant level, you're still doing that informed too. And so we really need to do the work and really combine the work of those levels. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this?
You may get to this later, but since we are a public body as well, connected city, how do we factor into this thing, right? So for example, a project that the public may not see a whole lot of, we might see more of simply because we're supposed to be the, I don't know, higher level consulting body on this. Because I haven't seen a way to differentiate between how the public would be involved. Like, for example, if there was one in airport where it's like, well, there's a board that definitely would care about that and they are a public board, but most of the public does not care or does not have the expertise for this, right? So how does that break
There's a
down?
couple of ways that I think there's probably your work ties into this structure. The first of which is at the involved level, you see input from commissions or advisory groups. That's you, that's
Yeah.
specifically you. So you can be one of those strategies at that level. I would assume even at the inform and consult, you're seeing things as you think about like staff updates on the calendar. Those are those types of things. But as you get down into the collaborate level, not listed specifically here, but your connection to that often is like if you think about the processes we've done over time, we ask for you to appoint a representative to different steering committees and those things. And I think that is happening. And then I would assume that's happening at that level. And then when it gets to thinking about involved, maybe they're coming back to you and bringing something for official body recommendation also. So I think there's probably varying levels, but also I would encourage you, even as members of this, to participate in those processes. And I know I've seen some of your faces at different things that are relevant to the things you've done in the past on committees, but come to those listening sessions or public hearings or open houses or take our online surveys or share them, help us get the word out, that those are other ways that you can contribute to what we're doing and that what's happening in public engagement.
I would just add that as far as identifying what level of engagement, at the point we propose a new CIP process, so we're going through that right now, where there was a call, for projects and with the public, but also department submitted projects. What we are preparing right now to put together, recommendations that ultimately are the city manager's recommended CIP that goes to the commission in June. At the time we're proposing the project, we're also putting in there, it would be this level of engagement. Yes, there's budget allocated for that level of engagement. And then when we get to this list here of strategies, this is once we start a project, we're initiating a brand new 2025 project. We're looking, okay, it was listed to be consult. So as we're working through that first scope of work with a design consultant or the consultant, we're saying, okay, we need to be looking at 1 to 2 engagement opportunities. They need to be this type. We also need to incorporate inform. And so we're doing that as we're writing their scope of work. Because in the past, before we had this guidance, we would have a scope of work and then we would get a month down the road and realize we're not at the engagement we need to be. And then we're talking, change orders and adding scope. And it's a lot less efficient and it's better to have that plan from the very beginning.
And when I first came on the team too, I know there was concern that we have different consultants help us do community engagement, but we didn't have documents like this to really present them and go, hey, this is our standard. We expect these marks to be hit when they're at these levels. And so we had consultants, doing their best for sure, but then the amount of engagement per project could vary and the quality could vary too. And so these tools help us to get both the project managers and the consultants to go, okay, if we're at this level, these are the steps that we do. These are the strategies that we use.
Sounds like a good candidate to include in the engineering design standards. I mean, if engineers are going to be approaching the city and trying to figure out what the standards there are for drawing specs and concrete design and slopes, like this is a standard as well, it seems. I don't know. So
I mean, it's part of the project management guide. There's an
okay.
entire guide about how project managers deliver projects.
Okay.
And this is part of that.
Is that like an internal city thing, like a city
Yes.
project managers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's their responsibility as staff to work with their consultant to make sure that those things are happening.
Is this like easily available to consultants who are looking to propose on a project and guess their level of effort for public engagement? They're like, I don't even know what the city wants. Like, oh, this is what they want. Okay.
No, we typically put a certain amount in the RFP, but it depends on when we issue that RFP, what we're looking for. Many times we're selecting based on expertise and we're working through the specific scope. You know,
Okay.
whether if we know we're gonna need something like a website, we will likely put that in the RFP, like there will be website development stuff, just so they make sure they have the right team members
Okay.
when they're proposing. But on an informed level, we'll just list kind of high level, the type of engagement. And then as we get into the scope, once we've, selected them, then we would get into the details.
Okay. That makes sense.
Do we have any data reflecting how the public prefers the different examples of techniques like physical versus electronic versus other kinds of things?
It's funny you mentioned that.
Good.
Because we were foreshadowing a little bit, but
Yeah, Michael, go ahead. Keep moving. You got it.
I bring fun to meetings. That's what I do.
That,
I think, yeah, so any other, before we move on, foreshadowing, any other questions, comments on that? I really appreciated the discussion on this.
well,
Anybody online? Do we have any commenters online?
Oh, good.
yeah, we can't see.
Oh, is this a different agenda? I don't know.
Well, we're on the next one. Oh, and I do see a member of the public.
Should we ask?
Yeah, is there,
Yeah,
is there?
John,
I see JT is member of the public.
Boxes. Any public
Just the
comment
second one
on
over.
Agenda item 3.
One more over.
If there's a microphone anywhere near you. You may need to speak a little louder.
Yeah.
Is there any
It's-
public comment on agenda item number 3? I don't hear any. We can move on.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the little animated thing there. I can't get over it. All right, so moving on to the next agenda item. This one will most likely be much more brief than the one before, but this is a cool little piece of tech tool that we've developed that I think is going to really help to talk about specifically kind of the points that you're talking about. So when I came on about, oh goodness, I'm losing track of time, about 3 years ago, of course, everything that I put out, I would make a record of. But very quickly, what I noticed is if I'm putting out 2 press releases and 2 social medias and working on a letter and working on this all during the day, stuff slips by me in terms of what did I do? What exactly did I do and put out there? And so over the years, I had different Excel documents that would track that, but they were all separate and they weren't necessarily useful data. We had the data, but how do I use that data to actually improve our communications, to figure out what channels people prefer to be communicated on? And so let me stop sharing and share the different screen here. And I want to introduce you to a tool that I call the MSO Communication Tracker, which is, if anybody has a more clever title, please let me know. Sorry, computer's a little slow here. All right. Perfect, you can see that. So the MSO Communications Tracker. So these used to be all separate Excel documents. Through the use of a little tech wizardry, I've created a form for myself that that streamlines the input process, the actual data being dumped into this document. The form is super simple. It asks me all my bare bones, basic things I am already doing when I'm putting out, let's say, a social media post, a letter, a press release, who, what, when, where, why, what platform are we putting it on, what time are we releasing, all that good jazz. Then it gets dumped into this Excel document, which then has more features. It allows me to sort by date. It allows me to sort by platform. It allows me to sort by topic. So for example, when I first showed Melissa this, I went, hey, I can show you how many posts and letters we did about recycling in January of this year. And before I made this tool, that would have taken a lot of manual going in, copying, pasting, dumping them into a new document and generating that. So one, it's just already streamlined our communications in general. Two, let me see if one of these has it here, because a lot of these have been press releases lately. But as I can go through, if you can see here, and I'll zoom in just a little bit. Oh, geez. So I can actually track, let's say, for example, a Facebook post, how many likes, how many comments, how many shares. And then I'm also tracking things like release time. And of course, it's a little, the form and the look of this will definitely develop over time. But the reason I'm very excited about this is because with this data, we can examine things like, oh, people aren't noticing if we have an open house, if we just do a press release. Sorry for those online. I'm trying to make this where we can spell the information here again. So for example, I have run into people in person who said things to me like, hey, I didn't know that you had an open house today. Where are you sending out these things? And then this document, I can go back to it and go, well, we're sending out press releases. We put something on Facebook. We've recently, City Comms has granted MSO access to Nextdoor. So now we're on Nextdoor and posting it there. I've gotten feedback recently that the city uses Instagram for more what they call evergreen content, more concrete stories that if you come back to it a week from now, it's still relevant. But I've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of younger residents here that go, I'm on Instagram. That is where I get my news and my information. If you're not utilizing Instagram, then I'm not getting it. And so I find feedback like that interesting because I can go back to my comms tracker and go, oh, yeah, we're not posting anything on Instagram. I don't have that data to back up that I'm meeting people there. I will note a limitation of this so far is that things like our fact sheets and our mailers haven't been heavily incorporated into this. And so from this point on, now that we have this tracker, it's much easier to keep track of those things. So for example, 2 years from now, I want to be able to go, how many mailers did we send out in general? How many mailers and fact sheets did we send out for just specifically open houses? And then we can go to our open house sign-in sheets, our check-in sheets and go, oh, even though we're putting it on Facebook, only 20 people are seeing it. And so it really allows us to be more intentional with how we communicate. And if you can't tell, I'm giddy about this. I've been wanting to do something like this for forever. I will note at the bottom as well, I won't click on it just because we have information from residents when they submit these, but I made a similar tracker for all of our MSO outreach. And so if you don't know, we have a form online. We can do things like wastewater tours and water treatment tours, which I think is the next agenda item after this. And so with that, people online can fill out a form and it automatically gets dumped into here. And that's super helpful because our outreach is spread across all the different MSO divisions. And so actually coordinating outreach used to be quite a hassle. And so with these tools, I'm very excited for future reporting for this board in particular as well. We can kind of show you the work that we've been working on. So with that whole spiel, any comments or questions, thoughts?
Yes, I need you to show me what you did because I need that for my job. Created, I need to do this for my. I'm like so excited.
A little like tech behind the scenes. One, I used AI to teach me how to make these programs talk to each other. I didn't feed it any information like this, more just teaching me how to make the programs talk. Microsoft Forms is the form that I use for input.
Okay.
And I found out that when I type, for example, the outreach form, it wouldn't alert us when somebody filled something out. It doesn't send you an email. But if you use Microsoft Power Automate, basically you can allow different Microsoft products to talk to each other. So most of this came from basically creating a workflow that works on the cloud. And so, yes, if we can find a time and I can nerd out about it. It took me quite a long time and I broke this more times than I like to admit.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
And then the look of this will change over time because obviously I'm dumping a lot of those likes and comments, those types of metrics in their own box. But I'd really like to get this pretty expansive. I mean, down to really granular stuff like, oh, posts released on Wednesdays in the morning are not seen as much as Thursdays at night. Just simple things like that I think can make our communications a lot more effective. With that, I will say, I'm going to stop sharing this. One other thing I wanted to add, because I'm cheeky, sorry. Here we go. Come on. There we go. Obviously, one of the main ways that we reach out to people is through our press releases and our email updates. I wanted to offer this and this handy dandy QR code, which goes straight to the Lawrence KS page where you can sign up for those things. This is right now, the place that we funnel people primarily, because that's where they can get, one, they can choose what they want to receive updates on, but that's where all those press releases go. But I am working with City Comms to sort of make this subscription page a little bit more robust. I find some of the options to be, some options are very clear, like a weekly traffic update, which I make every Friday. That's clear. You click that and you get that. But some of the categories I feel are more vague, and I'd really like to offer people the experience that they want to get.
Yeah.
So there you go. For anybody online as well, handy dandy QR code there. But super excited to share that and super excited to come back in the future and kind of show you what we've been able to accomplish.
That's great. One thing I was thinking about was last year, I think MSO sent out this magnet with what you could and could not recycle, which was brilliant, you know, you could put it on your trash bin.
That's great.
And I have a friend who works in waste management and on the trucks, and he was like, look, it was safety, you know, people were putting materials in there that were unsafe and workers were getting injured. And so I assume in the background, there have been conversations with comms about this. I wondered too, if there's like static, maybe schedule-based things like that you would, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a magnet, but something physical, like a card, like this is when your trash pickup is every week, you know, like you're on a Friday schedule or the bus schedule. But I know, as we talked about earlier, like there's route changes, but maybe like, how do you differentiate between things that are sort of project updates and things that are sort of static? This is what you need to know for this reason.
With the example that you brought up in particular, we had funding through our agreement with HAM, which is our MRF operator, for those educational materials, because those mass mailers, especially with the magnets, were
expensive.
We're fairly costly.
And if you print them out in paper, they're just gonna end up in the trash anyway.
Which, yes, and we were very intentional that when you remove the magnet, there's still an inlay on the other one, so you can keep that somewhere else. We were really trying to reduce the waste as much as possible. I guess as for the rest, do you have I don't quite know.
I would say, yes, some of it's dictated by how the work that's going on. So like police could speak to transit. They're going to do promos before the guide comes out, the new schedule changes, some of that. That's every year because those things are happening at that time. If there's winter weather service things, those are things like they're operational, but they know they happen at certain times. And I would say MSO probably has those too around weather or around seasonality, like the bike month, or there's, other some sort of safety month. When we go back to school, we have some safe routes to school messaging. I think there are things that are like that. And I think probably as Michael continues to build his work out, that those things can get more robust.
Like collection of yard waste,
Yeah, like in the summer. So a lot of those things are dictated kind of based on the operational thing. And I would say the other part is just the nature of our community with the influx of students, that some of that messaging, like, hey, by the way, we got one-way streets or other stuff like that.
Yeah,
In
not
August,
annual,
right?
but it's very
It's
seasonal.
a
thing.
seasonal
We're gonna have
thing.
a Huge rush of people leave in May. We're gonna have a huge rush come back in August.
Yeah, or like big waste pickup, or, I think a lot of those things happen and they're on our calendar in terms of service calendar, because we just know that's the time we're gonna deal with them. So we think about them like that.
That is how I operate.
Yeah.
Over my first couple of years, I kept going, oh, wow, so we do so much stuff, so much. So now I do have a yearly calendar in my notes that I highlight as we go through, because we do so much of that routine messaging. Like when fall starts, my stormwater team always reaches out and goes, all right, it's time for leaves, and take your leaves and don't let them go down the stormwater drain messaging. And so as this year has actually been a great testament to last year, I was still team members were still coming up going, oh, it's April and we haven't done water, blah, 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 blah yet. Well, this year, I'm actually having team members go, oh, you're already on XYZ. That's great. Thank goodness you're on it. So we're really, getting that organization that I think is really streamlining stuff.
Cool.
Great. I agree. I was going to just mention that same thing. Michael meets with our operational groups and, kind of develops that social media calendar, that messaging calendar, however we're doing it. But there's a lot of seasonality, especially in the stormwater messaging, but that's going into pretty much all our programs and operations on how we could message that routinely. We're getting into compost season, so that's another one that he's been messaging recently.
Yep, and he meets with me now weekly if I'm around or he's around. So we meet weekly on Mondays.
So touching on, the little foreshadowing that we had earlier, I'm very excited for the future of this because I think we can, if I had my own perfect world, we do some sort of survey that says, tell me how you want to be told things.
And we have, City Comms has done that and MPO's done that. We have it as part of our pedestrian plan that we worked on with transit. The challenging thing is you're still only talking to the people that you can get to take your survey or that you talked to in the first place, in some of that sense, but,
Inherently,
and inherently they're already
So-
engaged with you. And I think sometimes it's always going to be hard to get some people. And you're not going to get everybody. The goal in a lot of this engagement is not that you get everybody, it's that you get enough, that you're getting enough diversity in perspectives, that you're hopefully representing even the people that don't have the ability to come and represent themselves in the process, that you are getting enough perspective that you can consider all these values before you're making decisions. It would be unrealistic for us to expect 100,000 people to participate in, every.
Yeah, and how would you
Yeah.
read 100,000
Yeah.
People's survey results? You'd need an AI algorithm to read through.
Yeah.
What do you do when the survey results come in?
I haven't seen the results of the survey that we're referencing right now,
Oh.
but I'm.
Or any
Oh.
survey, yeah.
So I think it's up to really each project sponsor and their consultants to work through those. So I can speak to, well, Felice, you want to tell about yours for a little bit first and then
Yes.
we can speak to ours.
Yeah, so our team is primarily made up of planners who do our survey response. So we read and code each comment ourselves, and it's important to us to read each of them to really understand what's happening out in the field. We've also taken a lot of the surveys manually. So we positive, negative, neutral, each one of those messages that back out to you, the public, and then in our appendix, we also respond if possible to any of the questions that people are asking us and put that out in report format, which we then have to send out through our channels, which, hard to get that back out there, but they're on our policies webpage too. So all of our past reports and summaries and closing the loop are all on our policy page.
So like any of our big system-wide plans, we're doing a similar process. We have a shared participation, public participation plan. So transparency is really key in that. And so one of the things we do in all of that, and we're also doing all of our own data entry, all of our own analysis. Oftentimes that means categorizing comments together to help other people be able to process them. So if you've been on an advisory committee that's ever seen the work that we're doing, if it's about multimodal transportation, you may see here's pedestrian related stuff or school related stuff or bikeway stuff. Like we're separating stuff to help people process it by issues or topics. So you can kind of see all the stuff together, grouping things. Some of it's quantified and so like quantifiable data. And so we're either mapping that spatially or showing you what that looks like in terms of distributions for the whole community. And we're giving you oftentimes in all those processes, like if you go look at our long range transportation plan or our bike and ped plans, there's always an appendices that includes all of the comments we received. And that we believe in that because of transparency to put those things back out in those system plans to show you what we heard. And then when we are in formal public comment periods, we do respond back to stuff to let people know either we adjusted stuff or we didn't adjust stuff when we bring things back.
At least it lets people know their comment was reported and was seen by someone, whether yes, no. You can't say yes to everyone or you're gonna be pissing somebody off.
Yeah. But I think hopefully those things are helpful to you too. I think in the sense that it's nice, all those documents are in PDF. So if you're ever interested and you're hearing about some project, it's really nice because you can go Control F and Word find any of our major documents and see if something's mentioned. And we do that too. If we're getting ready to do a specific project, I'm like, have we heard anything about this specific crossing? Well, I may go look at that. I may go look up crossings. I may go look up this street. I may go look up that street. I may go look up a school. I may go look up a bunch of different words to see if I think that we've heard anything about that in the past that would give us any indication that there may be something more there we should explore. And so, she's. Yeah. So I think, as staff, we're using those tools also, but I would encourage you to think about how you could use those tools if there's some topical thing that you're looking at in that comment, because I think that's part of the process and the commitment we have to get to around community engagement is creating trust and transparency in that process. And so we hold ourselves to that standard. And then, on some of the project specific stuff, that level of detail may or may not be happening, but hopefully the intention is that the engineer is telling the story about the different things that's been heard, or their consultant is, to understand how we ended up at the decision we ended up at.
Just out of curiosity, other departments probably have communication roles kind of like yours. Has there been talk between you guys to see like, hey, what method do you use to track this stuff? Or it almost sounds like there's a case to be made for kind of a unified tool that maybe looks like this, maybe it's a combination of somebody else's tools, you know?
I can speak for City Comms that they had a community engagement working group over the past 2 years. They stopped meeting to sort of focus that and make those meetings a little bit more intentional for staff. Not every department has a communication representative. But when I showed City Comms this communication tracker, they showed a heavy interest in learning how to emulate it and give it to other departments. So I think those conversations.
Yeah, and we do have a transit communications expert, and we love Leonard, and she meets with you all, and we meet with each other as needed. They have shared Teams channel, so folks are definitely cross communicating on best practices.
We do a lot of peer learning too, I would say, is like people will reach out to, they know we work in this space as planners. They'll reach out. We ask each other to look at each other's stuff sometimes, or ask for feedback about like, hey, how did this go for you? You know, like something we've learned, which is like, don't table at grocery stores. If you're doing tabling for an event, everybody's like, go to grocery stores, people at grocery stores. People do not want to give you 5 minutes when they got to run at a grocery store. The library is a great spot, or the farmer's market where people have more leisure and time. And so there's like lots of like just things you maybe wouldn't know, that maybe work in other places, but do not work here. And we share those with each other a lot. Like, what are the best meeting spaces if you need to have an open house, or, you know, you need to do these things. And those are the type of informal things and some tools that we've built on the back end for staff to help support each other in doing some of that work. So it's not like any project manager has to reinvent the wheel to do that work. So we do a lot of that on the back end.
Just out of curiosity, in regards to the strategic plan, I'm assuming there's probably some metrics in the strategic plan that might correspond directly to what's going on here. Has development of this tool kind of helped better quantify the, I guess, compliance or achievement of those strategic plan goals?
I think there's a lot of potential there. I don't know that there's any, I'm not aware of any specific measure really so typically in the strategic plan, the outcome areas are the ones that have the KPIs.
Okay.
The commitments is engagement, and that's how we say we're going to do the things of the work of the outcomes.
Okay.
So in the outcomes, there are some touch point things, but like number of people. And I do think in the future, there could be. Right now, we don't have this level of intensity kind of data or information, but I think that those are things.
Under the strategic plan, and specifically this commitment under Connected City Outcome, it was looking at two different things. And all of that, the results came from a community engagement survey. So it would hear back on how we are doing on, one was your transportation experience, whether you're riding, you're driving, you're biking, you're walking,
So those are, yeah, but those are user experiences, and they're coming from a statistically valid survey process that we use. And so these are a little more like, well, these are interesting measures to have, because you could easily very much like, okay, well, if we spend 100 hours, we can just bump that number up, but like you can relate those things, but that doesn't necessarily mean more meaningful engagement, the more touch points you're having. So you have to be careful about.
You really need to get it more into like the sentiment analysis of what people are actually saying. And that's natural language processing is still a very early kind of thing, even with all the large language models people are putting out. I'd say that's probably the next frontier you need to work on with your tool after you get everything digitized. It's starting to pull in the information that people are actually leaving in individual comments and assessing on a broad stroke. People are generally happy about this change that we're doing, or happy about this project, or people are really upset about this portion. And I don't know how much more I have to say on that, other than if you want help on getting that stuff, Michael, I could definitely get you some research papers to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Michael, the way we've done that so far is really using these ETC surveys to guide those things, because they're like the city benchmarking standard for those types of things. And so there's a lot, of course, besides outside of the strategic plan and the connection to key performance indicators, there's a whole lot more you can read in those ETC reports. That's the company that does our survey, our statistically valid community satisfaction survey. And you can, those reports are online. You can go read an extensive amount of data and charts about what the people who have taken that survey have said about the community in a lot of different ways. And that, I think, are those types of, that survey is also helping guide this work, the work that the city is doing in some of those measures. Because it's not just about electively who participates, it's more of a representative sample.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that, it's how do you also consider the voices that you haven't heard? You know, I think especially when there's landscape changes in a city, you might have people that come out in opposition to something that can't be imagined, you know, and like, but they're like a protected bike lane is a good example, right? Like, why put that in? Well, there might be people that if it is installed would start riding a bike, but aren't, like, they don't feel safe doing it right now, you know, so they wouldn't come out to advocate for something that doesn't yet exist. Or housing is another example, right? Like, how do you have people come and advocate for something that that doesn't exist and they don't live in yet? You know what I mean? So I think too, how do you do public engagement where those, like, the voices can't be heard because it doesn't yet exist? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's challenging. I think it's challenging. And I think that's where some of the long range planning work that our community does, whether it's the comprehensive plan or, you know, like Plan 2040, or it's our strategic planning, community engagement, some of those big picture visioning spaces have to be where some of that happens. And I think the attempt at that isn't you're taking a survey and we're going to get big ideas. It's those processes have an investment of time for in-person meetings and charrettes and other things that allow people to dream together, and those frameworks have to be created. And part of it may also be our consultants and staff's responsibility to ensure that we're doing research in the space of best practices, and that there's opportunities for us there to find other examples. I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel in a lot of these things. We may be working at different paces than other communities, but there's a lot of space in that, or in those arenas, to go out and figure out what people are doing and bring it back, bring those ideas back in a forum then that goes through that kind of visioning or process. But those things probably are more so happening, hopefully, on some of the bigger long range planning processes, and are harder when you're in this space of actually implementing a project that's already been scoped or to scale. Yeah. But regardless, it's still challenging.
Yeah.
Because I think people are, what do they have experience with, right? Like, what have I experienced before? And they're bringing that and that emotional response to engagement, as opposed to sometimes this bigger visionary idea about what our community could become. And it probably just varies based on how you've established the tools you're using to do the work you're trying to do. I think steering committees have a lot of space in that to hopefully help us dream that members who are with us over a longer time of a topic areas and can help explore some of those things as we're doing, like some of the bigger system plans, are the space where I see a lot more of that happening. But it's hard. It's hard.
It is, yeah.
Because you don't want to write a plan that's just a big old wish list that sits on a shelf too. And that's the other reality, is it may be a really great solution and idea, but it may not be the right time yet for this community, financially, politically. You know, you're navigating all these things, and sometimes it's that, you know, it's reading all those things also as staff trying to implement it.
I had heard about this community that was using, what is it? VR. Like
virtual reality, yeah.
To envision it.
Yeah, so you could put on these goggles and it would have Mass Street on it, and this is what it would be like walking down Mass Street.
Oh, they built like 3D models of their cities and buildings in some cases to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the technology is there, but the cost is extravagantly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that groups like Meta and Apple are the only people who are really playing around with that kind of stuff at a big volume, because it is that intensive. I don't remember how much an Oculus headset running, whatever the one is that they run, medical set. I'm pretty sure last time I saw it was like $500 a piece. I mean, how how many sets of goggles are we gonna get for a community engagement for that?
Oh, just even the back end of building all the
Yeah, the
stuff.
server that you need to
You
run all
could
the software.
easily spend 40,000 creating the rendering model that allows.
Yeah, and that's $40,000 or $50,000 that you could use to fix potholes.
Right.
Right.
Or something else that's everyone's gonna
Yeah.
be useful.
Any other comments from folks, commissioners? Comments from online? Right. Right, hearing none, shall we move on to agenda item 4? Tour dates for the water and wastewater treatment plants?
Yes, I have Trevor doing that. I'm not sure. There he is. Okay.
I have a few dates on the agenda to consider. That was kind of the earliest where we kind of freed up. We're in a major construction project and hitting budget season, but so if we want to push out later than that, I got a lot more options as well. And just kind of wanted you guys to kind of discuss your interest and how you want to do it. Because I think we need to do we have to watch our numbers on the tour, so it's not like a meeting. So I think we need to do groups of 2. But the way I was thinking in my head was we could have a couple people go to water plant, wastewater plant, and then swap locations. And if I need to divide people up into different tour guides, I think we could accommodate that. AM schedules the suggested options because that's when we have the most staff to do the tours. But if that absolutely is an issue, we could probably find something later on past those dates as well.
What time would the AM?
I put 8 a.m. So I was thinking like a 2-hour window, like whether it be 8 to 10, 10 to noon, 9 to 11, something like that. And
I
that'd
wanna
give us
go,
about,
I'm ready.
Mhm.
Any of those dates. Let's go.
give us about
we-
45.
Oh, go ahead, Trevor.
I was just gonna say, I mean, basically it gives like 45 minutes at each plant with a 15-minute transition period.
Is this the sort of thing that other members of the public would be going to, or because we're trying to avoid hitting that quora that would trigger coma stuff, it would not be open to the public, just out of curiosity?
In my head, I was thinking about just kind of giving you guys, well, that's up for discussion I mean, if you want, but I was just thinking of just bringing you guys as the group,
Okay.
as the board, and then just managing it so we're in groups of 2 to avoid that issue.
Could we do 3? I forget exactly what our bylaws say, but there's only 6 active members in this group, so if we have 3 at any one time, that's less than quorum.
Yeah, you could do 3, 2,
Yeah,
and 2.
3 and 3, 2 and 2 would be fine. Yeah.
Do you want us to sign up right now?
It's really for you guys to discuss. If there's any dates you guys agree on, that's, I think, why we have it on here.
It's far enough in the future for me that work is probably not gonna be an issue. Mornings, I can work around whatever I need to. And I think that's a good week. My niece's spring break from Washington, I think, is the week of 21 to 25 April, so I should be available anytime that week.
Yeah, I could do the 28th or the 30th.
But any of them. Ryan, would you be able to make any of these? I know you work elsewhere, so. Will you
I should be able to, as long as I have like about a month in advance, I should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Ooh. Yeah, I can get any of those dates.
Did you want us to email Trevor? What would be easiest for you to coordinate?
I'm making a poll here
Oh,
based on what you're saying.
It'd probably be easiest if you guys locked in on a date and give me a time and we could make it happen. I gave you those 2-hour windows, but and we could also do like the 11 to 1 if you want to, tag in your lunch hours if that's easier, but I don't think we want to go later than 1 with my staffing availability.
Yeah, I will say the little bit later end is slightly preferred for me.
Like
But-
9 to 11?
Yeah, or Yeah,
10 to noon or something.
yeah, 10 to noon.
10 to noon works actually perfect for us.
Yeah.
Is the Kansas River wastewater treatment plant totally off limits because of construction, or is there a way to work around it? Because I honestly feel like seeing it during construction would actually be kind of a rare treat.
Nope, I can get you guys there for the construction. That's just, we don't do the bigger public tours there, obviously, because we have to provide all the PPE and there's a lot of stuff to avoid.
Yeah.
But if we have a very small, if we're in very small groups, we could navigate that pretty easily.
Bring my.
So do we want to queue up who wants to go on the 28th? Yeah, I'll go. Or actually, I'll go on the 30th, sorry. Sunday morning, what awaits me at work.
Yeah.
Sorry, anybody else on the 28th?
I can do
Hillary's
the
on the 30th. Yeah, I'll go on the 30th, please.
What'd you say, Ryan, the 28th?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I'll go on the 30th.
I'll aim for May 1st right now. First,
Who just said that?
me, Mike Wasikowski.
You can stick me wherever there's space. I can do any of those three days.
Would the 10 to noon slot work for those 3 days?
Mhm. Yeah. I'll make it work.
Yes.
Okay.
So I like.
I got 4. Who am I missing here?
Yeah, Hillary, Kate.
Well, there are 4 here.
Ryan.
So we have 5 altogether.
Yeah, I got Ryan.
He said he could float.
Nick, oh, Nick, what did you, Nick, you just said where?
Yeah,
Right.
Any of them.
stick me with their space. We good.
We can't have more than 3 on.
And then we're gonna have to reach out to the 2 absent.
Jenny and Allison.
Jenny and Alice. And where should we meet?
So we'll put it out, I think we'll start at the Kansas River for all of those at 10 a.m., which is 1400 East 8th Street. That basically dead ends into 8th Street. We always make a joke about our offices at the sewer plant at the end of the dead end road.
Great.
And then I want to go to show you the older water plant, the Call water plant. I think that'll be more convenient for our travel time, and that one is a more interesting tour.
Yeah. Water plant's pretty cool. A lot of them were constructed in like the 20s and 30s, and they're architecturally awesome. There's just really cool things going on.
Yeah.
This one's like 1910 CC.
That's
cool.
Mine too.
It's always fun to see like what equipment are you still making work for you? It's so far the record I've seen is a gas meter from the 1920s that still functions perfectly fine.
Oh, man.
It's freaky looking. It's like this big, but it works.
Perspective on the CIP when you see the Call plant. When you,
Yeah.
it's like, what's a pipe gallery at the Call plant? And when you see it, you'll understand.
Trevor, are you gonna show them the compost pile?
Well, they'll see it indirectly, but we're gonna focus.
I think it'll be obvious.
It's amazing, yeah.
Do we open this to public comment or sorry?
I don't know, there's much public comment for this topic. Are there members of the public who want to go on a tour too?
Okay, hearing none, should we move on to the calendar?
Okay, so
Go ahead.
up for the 21st, our Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan. Jessica will be back with us then for that conversation. And then Trevor will be leading a discussion with you guys on our stormwater equivalent units, which is something we're in the process of going through revisions on. And we'll kind of walk you through all of that and how it's being done and some of the other considerations that staff's been looking at as they've been trying to review all of that information. So that's a pretty big lift on that May agenda. And Jessica, what about your lift on the 21st?
Yeah, we'll see. I haven't seen a final draft yet, so
Okay,
but I'm expecting it,
hopeful,
so
yeah.
we're hopeful.
that date will work.
Yes.
And then did you want to mention the other topic we might?
Yeah, and between April and May, but I think in April also, the neighborhood traffic management program,
Justin.
Dustin I think is planning to come back. We have a timeline to show you the projects requested and the results of the open house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because isn't the deadline for the neighborhoods to apply like June, July?
Well, they applied
Last year, they applied last year, and
He had
this
a
is,
huge number,
Yeah.
and so he's been analyzing all that, and then there was a recent meeting about it.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, great.
So I think that you talk about an annual call for projects. I think the policy says that, but in operation, that hasn't been realistic. And so this may also be an opportunity where we talk about some need for changes to that based on what we've learned doing this program.
That's good. This looks great.
And have we settled on meeting here? I think this is a good spot. But I'm lost as to if we're still trying to, I can't remember if we're still trying to sort that
No,
out.
it's, I mean, I don't think we have a permanent spot yet for where to meet.
My other suggestion to the group was Fire Station 5 at 19th and Stewart, 19th and Iowa. They have a lovely space that you can use also with 4 TV screen, like 2 on each wall and a table set up and we've used that recently for some other meetings.
This one can be limited somewhat in parking if you have a bunch of,
Yeah.
people from the public that want to go.
I heard that the municipal court may be moving their operations to a leased space, which would free up, possibly free up space at City Hall too. On Monday nights.
It would be well into the calendar year before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they used to be in that building on like 10th and New Hampshire or something. But I guess, yeah.
At this point, I think we're gonna leave it here, for the next month and
That works.
we're at moving forward. Cause we change all the time. It's just as bad as being somewhere where people can't, get there. So.
Yeah,
Agree.
I think that's the thing I was gonna say most is just, so
Consistency.
we can pick a spot so people know where to go.
Great.
And if we want to, I mean, I'm down for the fire station too, if that accommodates more people, has better parking, all of that. I don't care, but, I think just as long as we pick the spots.
Well,
think
on the
staying-
parking note, isn't that whole gravel lot after
Can't
4
use
o'clock?
any of that. That's KU, so all we can use are the parking spots that are striped
But it's.
per the agreement with KU.
That's where I park.
Otherwise, we could be responsible for any maintenance of it, bringing in gravel and all of
Okay.
that.
The
They watch
parking
it pretty
spots that are striped, where, somebody might just have to show me when we walk out, because I didn't see anything that seemed like I could park there. It said staff only everywhere that I saw, so I
Yes.
just need a teacher.
Yeah, there's this side, if you're west of the gate, and then staff only is east of the gate. There's a
Okay.
gate that usually is up. But we can show you.
Okay, thanks.
I think there's about 10 total stripe spots for staff
Oh,
and
okay.
public.
I mean, honestly, I should just be riding a bus to get here, so. I'll work on that next time.
You need travel training? We can also-
Transit app. Transit app is great. Seriously.
I gotta say, it's so much easier riding bus these days than those back before smartphones.
Oh,
So much easier. It's ridiculous back in the day, so.
And then we're gonna, are we gonna talk about what happened in the CIP in August after it's passed? Is that what we talked about, Melissa? I can't remember.
It will go to commission in June.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So, depending on the timing of that, Melissa, whether you want to bring that here that same month, I'm not sure how that would fall. It might be that it then would come to this group on Monday and then commission would be the next day.
Right.
That would be seeing the CIP, but it really, there's a lot of, adjustments to that as it goes through the CIP committee and then to exec team and Craig, until it gets to the commission.
What about our non-motorized project CIP? I forget what the timeline is for that one, but I feel like we usually touch it at least a couple times a year.
It happens after CIP.
Yes.
So, okay.
CIP is next budget
Yeah.
and then
I thought it was, September, October, thought last year.
It's a workload dependent, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, although yeah, some of it's tied to grants too, like when you know some stuff,
Mhm.
like when you know timing for some of the match and other things, but I don't know that it's a set time every year. Maybe it is.
If we're in this, like the general schedule, right, I was also curious, are there any major touch points on ongoing or upcoming projects, like any design milestones or scoping discussions for anything that we should know about? Like Mass Street is eventually gonna have to go to a final design, but I don't think that's even funded yet, right? Because we're still waiting on a grant to come in.
We're waiting to hear back about the 2 grants on that project.
And then there's the Sunflower project, or at least the Ninth Street part of it, which presumably will go to final design at some point, or is that already?
Are you talking about Jayhawk Watershed?
Yeah,
That one is starting construction. I think it went out in the construction update
Okay.
this week, but yeah, that one is underway.
okay.
And there's Bob Billings castled to Monterey.
That's right,
That's kind of at the field check set, and so that will be moving to advertisement soon as well.
Okay. I think on the ninth one specifically, it'd be interesting to see how it kind of all shook out, because if it's a final design, I know there were some things that we had talked about the last time that it came to MMTC.
Mhm.
Even just like a brief update to know like what state, like do we still have like the same general configuration, bike lanes, did the parking issue get sorted out, stuff like that?
And I can check to see, I think we have the agenda item that went to the commission that gave a pretty good summary on that before it
Okay,
advertised.
yeah, I mean,
Could
feel
share
free
that.
to.
Yeah.
Or direct me.
As well. And it has a really good website, Jayhawk Watershed also. So if you
Okay.
go to lawrenceks.org/construction, there's certain projects that also have websites, and that is one of them.
Okay, I'll just look at that, so don't worry about it. I was also just gonna check in on the possibility of a retreat for Connected City to kind of set our goals for the year and figure out how to like wrap our arms around the scope and stuff like that. Has that, I guess, Hilly, that's probably in the background, you and Melissa talking about retreat stuff?
We haven't talked about it
Not
yet.
yet. Okay.
We can, do you want to chat about it later, Melissa?
Yeah, we'll have to talk offline, so.
Anything else with the calendar?
So I'm not seeing the Jayhawk Watershed one on the city construction site. But is it active project web pages? Because
If Melinda wants to help you, we certainly can help you after this on that, but
it's fine, yeah.
probably since we've completed our agenda, it would be best to go ahead and close the meeting, just simply because we're not within the topic anymore. Sorry.
That's okay, you're right.
Okay, so shall we move to adjourn?
I would motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, first by Commissioner Kuzniak, second by Commissioner Andis. Andrus.
I'm
Got
just
that.
teasing her because I can't. That's okay. How's that?
Okay, thank you all.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
With construction just starting,
Probably not active.
probably not move over to the construction.